I'm Christy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is The Psychic
And the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this episode, we are continuing our Civil War Ghosts series. This time on the Battle of Bull Run.
Like our part 2, I guess you could say, in a sense.
Sure. Part 2 of Civil War.
Moving right along in the battles.
Right. And in these episodes, we are covering the history behind these battles, these famous battles during the Civil War, and then diving into the paranormal experiences that have occurred on these locations back then and in modern day experiences.
Yeah, and there was a lot of these battles, I think 13 to be exact. So we're not going to be able to cover all of them for the sake of time on the podcast. So we're just going to cover 6 of those main ones that really have the intriguing stories and the intriguing paranormal sightings. So we hope to bring you lots of not only historical information in this, but lots of good ghost information too.
Right.
Ghost stories.
Yes, there's lots of famous places. And if you're not big on Civil War history, almost everybody's heard about the Battle of Gettysburg, which we will get into that.
Oh, that's my favorite, I think, out of all of
I'm
them.
looking forward to that episode.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned until then. But we did talk about Fort Sumter, where it all began, in our first episode on this series. So go back and listen to that one if you missed it.
And if you follow us on Facebook and Instagram, we do have a map that I created with all the different battles. It numbers them 1 through 13, tells you who won, what dates that it was, the name of the battle. So if you kind of want to see these places that we're talking about for each of the battles, you can definitely check out that map.
And that may be helpful for our international listeners, which I want to give a shout out. We've got some listeners from places like Singapore who seem to be coming back. So hello to whoever you are, if it's one person out there.
Yes,
in
South
Singapore.
America, Central America.
We appreciate that we have listeners in the UK. We've got some listeners out there.
Canada.
Canada.
Kind of got them here and there. Yeah. And
Yeah,
of course, all of our North American listeners as well.
Right.
Hi, Jill. We want to say thanks. You know, we got to do that every time now.
Right.
For those of you guys that don't know the inside joke, she is a very good friend of ours, also with our sister Team API. And she is very faithful about listening to each episode every week.
So we appreciate her feedback too. So
yes,
if you would like your name called out on the podcast, write us in, give us some information, tell us what you like about our podcast. If there's a series that you particularly like to listen to, we will take your suggestions and even recommendations for episodes. Let us know if you'd like us to shout out your name on the podcast. So let's get into the history of the Battle of Bull Run.
Let's do it.
The Battle of Bull Run also was called the First Battle of Manassas, which was the first major land battle of the American Civil War, and it was fought on July 21st, 1861, near the town of Manassas, Virginia. So that's how it got the name.
I think of Manassas, I think of molasses, which makes me think of syrup.
Manassas, molasses.
Where do they come up with these crazy names? It must be a Yankee thing.
My childhood home was on a street called Sweet Hill Road. And it was called Sweet Hill Road because a molasses truck had an accident and molasses spilled and rolled slowly down the hill.
What were they doing? Licking the streets to know that it's sweet?
I feel like that's like an urban legend of this small town, though, because there were other molasses incidences in places in New England. I'm like, this is a common story.
You know what they say? Sometimes there's a little grain of truth. To every,
Why is it always molasses? And how did they get the name Manassas? And I think that might be a surname or something for that area.
Yeah, it could be.
As you might recall, the first episode in this series was on the Battle of Fort Sumter, the battle that initiated the war, which began in April of 1861. So here we are in July. Both the Union and the Confederacy are eager for a quick victory in this Civil War. So both armies felt this was just going to be over really quickly. We'll go fight this battle and it'll all be done with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Union Army was led by Irvin McDowell, and his army marched south from Washington, D.C., and the Confederate forces were led by P.G.T. Beauregard. And then later, some reinforcements for the Confederacy came under Joseph E. Johnston. So people on both sides were fighting near a small river called Bull Run, hence the other name, Battle of Bull Run. So early on, Union troops had some success by pushing back on the Confederate front lines. However, when Thomas Jackson and his troops came in for reinforcement, they regrouped on a hill, and this is how he got his nickname Stonewall Jackson, because his army was standing firm like a stone wall on that hill.
Huh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but we've all heard Stonewall Jackson before, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
By the afternoon, Confederate forces counterattacked, and then the Union troops panicked and retreated. And it was pretty chaotic because of all of the spectators and civilians that were in the area. Everybody's running. Nobody knows where to go, trying to get out of the way. They weren't expecting this counterattack.
That's what they get for being a spectator to begin with. My gosh.
Yeah, you get up in there.
Wow.
FAFO, right?
I like seeing people shot and stabbed. And
No. So ultimately, the Confederate won this particular battle on this day. So 4,700 total casualties. So that's killed, wounded, or missing from both sides. And this mattered because it destroyed the idea that war was going to be quick and easy. So
war is never quick and easy.
This forced the Union to realize that they need to prepare for a longer conflict. And it led to more experienced commanders to come out and prepare for longer, more drawn-out battles. So a year later, in the same area, another major battle or clash had occurred. The regrouping had occurred, and they all reconvened again. This was considered the Second Battle of Bull Run. So altogether, we have these two phases a year apart from each other. The second phase was in August of 1862, and it also led to a Confederate victory. So all in all, the Battle of Bull Run was won by the Confederate and increased their confidence and helped boost their morale in thinking they could actually win this thing. So it brought in more volunteers, more militias to fight against the Union Army. The reason it fell apart for the North was because the timing and coordination fell apart. The reinforcements that the Confederacy had experienced. This was one of the first major uses of railroads in war. So these reinforcements came by railroad. So they were able to quickly get there and help out. And so Union wasn't prepared for that. They couldn't handle all these reinforcements. So they were outnumbered at key moments during this battle. Soldiers from the North were inexperienced. Again, they thought this was going to be an easy thing. So they didn't really prepare. It taught them valuable lessons about training and preparation, which led to some of the future battles that we will talk about in future episodes.
We're going to start talking about some of these documented ghost sightings at Bull Run. And Manassas National Battlefield Park is considered one of the most haunted Civil War battlefields, of course, after Gettysburg. But
Right, I was going to say, wow, how could it be more than... We always hear about Gettysburg.
Yeah, it's not.
More,
Gettysburg has got it beat. But it does have some interesting things that are noted. The Battle of Henry House Hill was important because it was the decisive ground of this first battle. Now, it was the site of the conflict's most tragic civilian deaths and is now considered a very haunted part of this battlefield. Now, to give you a setup here, the fighting surged around the home of Judith Henry. Now, she was an elderly widow who refused to leave her house. Union artillery shells struck her house, and it killed her. This would be considered one of the battle's most tragic civilian deaths ever. Now, what made the Henry house so important was that it rose above the surrounding fields, making it where it was a good defensive position. You could see what's coming.
Yeah, no trees in the way.
Right. So it had things like open slopes with limited cover, great visibility in all directions. Now, it was near the Warrington Turnpike, a key road area for back then, and it dominated the surrounding battlefield. Now, both sides knew that control of this hill meant they would have control of this particular battle. On July 21st of 1861, elderly widow Judith Carter Henry was killed, like we mentioned, by Union artillery fire, making her the only civilian fatality of this entire battle. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
But civilian.
Because there were a lot of civilian observers too, but she's the only one who got killed.
Maybe because she couldn't escape, and she wasn't one of those
Right.
ones that was looky-looing.
Wasn't she or wasn't it thought that she was bedridden?
Yes.
And that probably is why she couldn't leave her home. Yeah. But she would have refused either way. She'd stand her
Well,
ground.
yeah.
It's my house, right?
This is my house. Go fight somewhere else. But sadly, the house was destroyed during the fight. It was later rebuilt. And I do have a historical picture that I will show of the house
there's
destroyed.
nothing left. They totally decimated this poor woman's
Oh,
house.
for sure. Yeah, you have a wooden structure. I'm not sure if that's some sort of fireplace area or whatever.
Yeah, some stone that was left.
But it's the only thing that was standing here, it looks like, from this.
Gosh, I wonder if they knew she was even in the house.
Maybe not. I don't know. Surely they would have checked to see if there were any civilians in the home.
The battle starts and there's a lot of chaos, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
And the civilians at Fort Sumter had taken off. Like they had all left the area because the fighting was beginning. So maybe there was the assumption that just happened here too. But
could have
because she
been.
was bedridden, she couldn't leave.
It could have been.
Yeah, that's even more tragic.
And during this incident, this battle, you had these Confederate sharpshooters, and they used the house as cover. So that right there is messed up in its own right.
Oh, so they would have seen her in there.
I would have thought, yes. And then you had Union Captain James Ricketts, who turned his cannons toward the home, and that's how the shells struck it, killing Mrs. Henry. So he was trying to get the sharpshooters who were using the house as coverage and ended up killing poor Mrs. Henry. So
They probably died too, but I can see how maybe they didn't foresee that coming, that the whole house would get destroyed. And maybe they just thought she'd be protected because they're shooting out of the windows and at the enemy.
Right. The original house itself was nearly destroyed with only the chimney left standing after the battle and subsequent troop damage. A reconstructed house now sits on the site, and for that period of time, this would have been a really large-size house. Now, let's talk about what type of ghosts are seen here.
Yeah, let's get to it.
So, visitors and park staff have reported seeing apparitions of an elderly woman in period clothing. They say that lights inside the reconstructed house at night come on, go off. If you're inside that reconstructed house, you hear movements when there's nobody else in the home. And then in the area, you also hear phantom artillery that, goes off.
Oh, that's okay. Some of the very typical claims that we see, like the light, I'm thinking, how bad is the wiring? But artillery sounds in the distance, and that is not normal.
No, but, on a lot of these old battlefields,
Oh, yeah, common claim.
yes, you hear a lot of those claims about that happening. And a lot of people believe that Judith still haunts this place because of how violent and sudden her death was.
Right. And that is the theory because of the patterns that we see on locations that have paranormal activity. If it's connected to the land, it's usually some kind of tragic death that had occurred there.
Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not she's residual, whether or not she's intelligent,
Right.
I don't know because we don't have enough information.
Go and find out and take the team and our equipment.
I could definitely see it being a residual as imprint,
Yeah.
or if it is intelligent, maybe it would be one of those things where she didn't really know that she's dead because it did happen so quick and so tragically.
Gosh, maybe she needs some help.
Exactly.
What do you think the incidence is of residual versus intelligent on Civil War battlefields? Do you think that it's mostly residual?
I think a lot are, but I don't know. I think it could be a mix of 50-50, really. I could see residual, but I could also see intelligent.
Just case by case, right?
Yeah. And how many people that died. there could be some
Well, I
lingering
mean,
spirits.
some of these deaths could have been really quick, and I could see a spirit not being aware of what happened and being trapped,
Oh, for sure.
versus maybe somebody who was in a makeshift battlefield hospital that maybe suffered for a while and knew their death was coming and maybe prepared beforehand. And
Yeah. Well, in this site, this Henry Hill House, there's not only these claims that I mentioned, but visual encounters. People say that they see shadowy figures march across the hill. They see full-bodied apparitions of soldiers. They see figures, then they suddenly dissolve into mists. There's also auditory. They hear musket fire, cannon blasts, bugle calls. That's interesting.
yeah, my skeptical brain is like, how could this be explained? And bugle calls would be a hard one to be explained by some kind of logical phenomenon. Like maybe there's a kid in the neighborhood who's practicing his trumpet in his backyard.
But
The
these are
odds of
national
that-
parks.
Exactly.
You're not going to have people living up
Sure,
and
this
close.
is a museum or something, but
Yeah.
what's in the distance? I'm just saying these are the things that you would have to look into and rule out to confirm activity. Or what's compelling is the shadows and stuff. So my thought is, what does the land look like today? What could lead somebody to mistakenly think they're seeing an apparition, and there's some logical explanation that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
They're expecting to see something, so then their eyes play tricks, and then they think they see something.
So what about this?
Yeah.
What about people who report hearing orders, like military orders, shouted off in the distance, and then they also see lines of troops who are reenacting
Yeah.
the battle?
Well, do reenactors do reenactments in this area?
Yeah, but here's the thing. I don't know specific to this site, but if you're a visitor, you're going to know if there's a reenactment going on.
You would think.
The park rangers, the park itself is going to say, hey, try to catch this
Yeah.
reenactment show happening at 1 p.m. or whatever.
Sure, reenactments do happen. Those are planned and permitted and organized by the parks, but sometimes people just show up wearing period garments just to feel immersed into the environment. I would think that's not that common, but yes, I guess that's true that there would be safety concerns and they might stop people if they're doing this big fancy reenactment. But maybe somebody who's in the area happens to see someone in period costume, or maybe they're on their way to a reenactment and they're thinking that they see something that's paranormal and an apparition versus just an actor going to his skit.
I guess depending upon that person, but I do believe that some of these places have these, if not residual, intelligent apparitions of these soldiers reliving. You think of all the trauma that they encountered.
Oh,
In fact, there's a video. It's been circulating the net for many years. I'll have you take a look at that video and see, but it really resembles soldiers coming up out of the woods to fight. I don't know. I'll let you see it, but it's something that I believe is a legit video.
We'll see about that.
I know photos and videos is not your thing.
As the open skeptic, if there's gonna be any truly haunted locations in America, some of these battlefields are going to be it. I mean,
Absolutely.
the setup, the theory behind it, the sudden death, the traumatic death, the painful death, all of those things that could imprint the environment for anything residual or even lead to some kind of intelligent haunting, somebody trapped earthbound. That potential is there. If it's going to exist, it's going to be in some of these locations. As the open skeptic, not completely discounting what some of these claims are. I wasn't there to witness what some of these people witnessed.
Right.
And I'm not there to judge whether what they're seeing is their eyes playing tricks on them. And
Do I believe these hauntings exist, though? Yes.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Just what are the things that we would need to consider first to rule out potential mistaken identity of paranormal activity
Sure.
versus actual. So once you've ruled everything out, even what I said about the trumpet player, like a kid in his backyard practicing, you do have to consider that. What are the odds of that happening? Slim to none. But you still have to consider, or is there a neighborhood nearby? Could there potentially be somebody who's created a sound that I'm now thinking is a bugle caller from the Civil War who's trapped here, earthbound, you know? You have to be logical about certain things, because if you're not, anything could be a haunting. Any
Well,
bump in the night could be a
That
haunting.
is true.
So
That is true.
if you can't find that logical explanation, what you're left with is the paranormal.
Which is what we always say, the paranormal, the normal not yet understood.
Or we just haven't found a logical explanation for it.
True.
If you're a skeptic.
I think our next one we have is the Stonebridge one. You want to go ahead and tell us about that?
Stonebridge is a literal bridge built of stone over Bull Run River in Virginia. And so this whole battle is in that northern part of the state of Virginia, pretty close to Maryland and then on into Washington, D.C. This bridge was a critical landmark during the first and second battles of Manassas, this town where this Battle of Bull Run occurred. It was the site of the first shots that were fired on July 21st of 1861. It was a major crossing point, so since it was defended by Confederate troops, they realized that this bridge was a critical point. So during that retreat, the Confederate forces destroyed the middle of this stone bridge to slow down advancement during the retreat from this area. The Union forces had tried to reinforce it again and used wood to cross this river here at the old bridge so that they still had a way to go. So they're climbing over this wood piece. And eventually the Confederate rebuilt the structure after the battle had ended. So in 1884, they created a replica. So it looks exactly like the original bridge. So it's basically made of stone, and it has these stone arches underneath at the river point. So
it's really cool looking bridge.
Yes. I believe we have a picture planned to be up on our Facebook and Instagram pages to check it out. The site is currently part of the Manassas National Battlefield Park as a preservation of this historical crossing point. But it also serves as the site of many paranormal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's a lot of sounds with some of these places, this auditory type phenomenon. So marching boots are heard across this bridge, sounds of footsteps running, so that could have been part of the retreat, horses galloping when there's no horses in the area. And I think with the design of a riverbed, things can echo. So are there falling rocks or things that people are hearing that can sound like maybe a hoof print as it goes down the ravine into the river? Some of these things could explain it. These are things you have to ask yourself if you're in this area and you're witnessing or you think you're hearing things.
Mm-hmm.
But wheels creaking, like wagon wheels passing by, that's interesting. How would nature cause something like that to occur? Then there are other paranormal activities like smells. The smell of gunpowder. Now that's pretty unique.
Mm-hmm.
Gunpowder, you would have heard gunshots from an actual gun if you're smelling the gunpowder, and you'd have to be pretty close.
Now,
so
can
you would have
smells
known
be residual, you think?
I think any type of activity, in my opinion, could be residual if it has to do with your senses. Vision, hearing, smells, maybe even feelings, but there are some other logical explanations with feelings. Like this area also has sudden temperature drops. Now, my current neighborhood, we have a little low area where it's like a little creek that could come through. And anytime you walk into this area, there's a cold spot, especially this particular time in the evening. Are these experiences these people are having in this area occurring at dusk when you're going to get some of these cold spots, especially in areas like this where there's a creek or a river running through? That's a normal, natural sensation that you could feel, but that's like your tactile, the temperature changes. There is paranormal theory about drops in temperature, and I don't think we've discussed this yet on our podcast, but temperature drops. If you're watching any of the paranormal TV shows, they've got the ambient thermometers, and they'll say, oh, look, it's a cold spot. There's a ghost. Come over here. Feel it right now. And you see all these people like, ooh, and on over this little cold spot. And
oh, dang it. I got hit. Don't get me started on some of those.
And you know me with my theory on temperature, which is just, if you look at the other theories in paranormal investigation, what is a ghost? It's energy. Energy would be heat, right? So if a ghost is present, you would think it'd be a warm spot. So what else do we see when we investigate? We see battery drain and usage of energy. And there's theory that in order for paranormal ghosts, I guess, to manifest by sight or sound, they need energy to create these occurrences. So are these cold spots just the footprint of where a ghost was? That's a theory I've come up with over the years. It could be where a ghost was. They left the cold behind because they've used the energy from that spot.
Some places that I've gone to and investigated in the past, we would have the heat sensor. So it would pick up on hot and cold
thermal camera
objects. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One time we were in this one particular place and we were having things thrown at us. And no, it wasn't from a Bigfoot. It was from a ghost just out of nowhere. And it wasn't one of us either.
Were you in a building or outside?
We were in a building.
Yeah.
And so whenever we put the camera on it, we would see the heat and watch it slowly fade. So what you're saying makes sense as far as the absence of the heat, but these objects we saw had the heat with them. But like, again, you could just slowly see it starting to fade.
And I'm talking about like the cold spots from ambient temperature, not on surface. Because a lot of the temperature guns on television are surface temperature.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't read the temperature of the air, but the cold spots that they're feeling come from the air.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory is that the energy that's in the air, if drawn from, would leave a cold spot.
Correct.
That's a stretch, though. As the skeptic, I'm
but
like,
it makes sense.
How is that even possible for energy to be drawn from just thin air? And because usually you need some kind of conductor, and usually you can feel that, like the static charge in the air. That would be energy that's not grounded or ready.
The negative ions.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, in a river, you've got too much that explains a natural phenomenon, like what we were talking about with dusk, the sun setting, and the river and currents. The flow of the water can pull air with it too.
And there is a theory out there for the paranormal that water is a conduit, that it can actually help provide energy that's needed, and it can transport energy as needed.
We do know that in science. Yeah, you don't put your toaster in the bathtub because you'll get electrocuted. So energy can travel through water, yes. You'd have to be in the water to feel that, though. I'm talking about the cold spots in the air. So the claim that there's a sudden drop in temperature.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. But I'm just saying, some of these places where we find paranormal activity, we see some of these sources like water, limestone.
Yeah, totally different theories, but yeah. And so pointing towards the believer side, maybe that could be why this area has those apparitions that you see. Maybe
more
that's
claims
a source
of paranormal
that
activity.
They can draw that energy from.
Mm-hmm.
So without being there myself to see if any of the environment makes sense to why the temperature drop is experienced. If it's midday and the sun's shining on you and you got this massive cold spot, did you also see a shadow, or were you hearing things? What else was going on that could have been the activity that drew the energy from that spot?
We definitely need to take a road trip and hit all of these battle sites. I think that'd be so cool.
Make it make sense. Is there logic even within the paranormal theory? Is there some logic behind it?
Yeah, but can you prove it?
Right.
There's the question.
Also like this panic-like feeling. So I wonder if there's like a little bit of the people who've experienced some of this activity may also have some kind of empath type gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So
like an ability.
Yeah, because that's a confusing claim to me. Panic-like atmosphere. What do you mean by that? People who feel panic when they're there?
No, I think more of like staticky charged air. I think you can notice a difference. So for example, you've heard me, and this is an older term, but call out sometimes like when you're doing a sit down and you're like, oh, the coloration changed, meaning the environmental feel changed. And with that, you may get a dead silence. You may hear like a little slight ring, but more so it feels more like an energy level, more so than like outside animals and all that.
Yeah, but that usually occurs too. And I think that kind of increases the spook factor. So like you're out in the woods and there are no creatures chirping because there's a predator in the area. And that can create like a doom and gloom in the feelings of if you're out in the woods hiking and you're like, wow, that's a change. Why did all the animals become quiet? And you're like, there's danger. And that's a natural instinct where you would feel a little bit of anxiety in that case.
Right. But also think about if you're on investigation, or even if you're not, you're experiencing a haunted location. Where does those feelings of being watched come from? Besides high EMF, you're going to say that. But I'm just saying
the appliances.
It's the atmosphere, the charge or the lack of within the atmosphere. And I think that is where this possibly could come from, this panic-like atmosphere.
Or maybe there's some power lines that are old that need some grounding.
Oh, good gosh. I give up. Moving right along.
But if you look at the history, which is why I'm also the historian, we know that the Union retreated from this area, and it was chaotic and very panic-stricken. So are empaths in modern day that visit this area experiencing those same feelings? Are they feeling what the soldiers felt at that time? And knowing the stories and the background of what happened there, if you're a visitor, you can be caught by that emotion. You could be feeling those emotions that your own body creates. And I would say, if you want to look at that as ghostly, then yeah, their memory and what they went through can invoke emotions in us if we know their story.
For sure.
So what about Matthews Hill?
All right. This is truly where the battle began and where the more intense fighting took place and where the Confederate and Union forces really collided. So you had Confederate forces under a Nathan Shanks Evans, and initially they'd occupied the hill to block a Union flanking maneuver. But they were forced to retreat to Henry Hill after heavy fighting. Now, this area was also used during the Second Battle of Manassas in 1862. Now, with that said, the significance of this is because this is a place that allowed the Confederates to actually pause for a minute and find more strategic places like Henry Hill, where they could have a better advantage and strategic position. So with that said, you have this initial engagement where the battle began on this hill, and Union Colonel Ambrose Burnside's brigade collided with these Confederate forces. Now, although outnumbered, the Confederates mounted a 90-minute delaying action before retreating towards Henry Hill. And there was this farm, and it was located on this piece of land, and the house actually served as a hospital during the battle here, treating the wounded officers, including Colonel John Slocum and Major Sullivan Ballou. So it wasn't just for the more lesser officers. If you were wounded in any way, and they had to do that along the way, they would use barns, they would use any sort of buildings that they could.
Houses that were nearby.
Yes. 13 months later, Union Major General John Pope used the nearby Chinn Ridge for staging attacks even, keeping this area strategically significant. Now, as we know, and we've talked a little bit, whenever you have such traumatic events that take place, it could lead to residual or even intelligent hauntings. Some people have reported paranormal experiences here, like hearing these volleys of musket fire or seeing smoke, like the smoke drift across clear fields, even vibrations. I thought this was interesting. Vibrations from distant artillery. Have you ever heard of that before, Kathy?
As paranormal activity, I've heard of earthquakes.
No, earthquakes are not paranormal.
Which could explain what these people are feeling.
But what I'm saying, have you ever heard that reported, though?
No, as paranormal activity?
I don't think I have too either.
I think if you're set up in a spot that has a very historic location and you're thinking, ooh, this is spooky because people died here and a battle happened here, and you get slight tremors, and then the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic area can get minor earthquake tremors. I wonder if that's what they're feeling.
Maybe. Some sort of like shifting of the tectonic plates or something.
Yeah, it occurs there. And they're not used to that. That's not a common thing. You might get what feels like a truck driving by on a highway to be the seismic activity, like the intensity you might feel in an earthquake on the East Coast.
Right. And what I think might be a little more interesting if they were actually hearing the artillery.
Right.
And then feeling the vibration at the same time. What we say when you're collecting evidence, if you can get at least two forms that corroborate each other, then that there is more compelling than if you were just to get a single.
Just like what we do on an investigation. We won't just take any one thump in the wall to be evidence of a ghost unless we also have changes on our meters. We're also hearing things, smelling things, seeing things, and we have this anomaly occur.
So, and this area here, it sounds more to me like this might be residual because there's not really apparitions being listed
These are experiences that could be explained. Like smoke drifting across a clear field could be fog.
Yeah.
So unless I was there to see, or any of us were there to see, if it's, I would think people have seen fog before and would know the difference. So I want to give the person the benefit of the doubt that maybe it was like a puff of smoke or plume. And was there any campfires in the area? Is there camping in this spot? Probably not. This whole area is a park, a historic
national
park. So you're probably not doing things like that in this area, but
Right.
you still got to rule the things out.
Right. So that's what I'm thinking. More residual probably in this particular area.
So next in our story is Sudley Church, which is also located in Manassas, Virginia. This church played a crucial role during the Civil War, especially the Second Battle of Bull Run in August 1862. The church was seized by the Union and converted into a field hospital, treating over 300 wounded soldiers during that battle. Now, these are small churches, too. So over time, that's a lot of people crowded into one space.
Yeah.
The stewards removed pews, and grass or hay, straw was all over the floor with blankets on top to make beds for these soldiers. They just laid them wherever they could find space.
Wow.
And they even used the altar as an operating table. And because obviously, like, they had people who urgently needed surgeries and amputations in particular, which was a very common surgery during the Civil War. And as they didn't have anesthesia at that time.
Right.
So they had to use barbaric tools and just hack away at a limb. Yeah,
That makes me hurt
anesthesia.
thinking about that.
I think sometimes they tried things like whiskey to help numb the pain a little bit for them.
Oh, I can imagine.
But you still feel that, and you're awake for it. So
Have you ever
the
seen
agony they must have gone through.
Yeah, have you ever seen any of those old tools that doctors would use, like the saws and
Yes, museums.
gosh.
All the
That
old
makes me hurt.
medical tools. Ooh,
Yes, that makes me hurt just thinking about those. I just could not fathom.
those poor people.
I know, having a limb cut off with, oh no.
No. Thank goodness for anesthesia and modern medicine.
Right.
So the church's congregation experienced a direct encounter with the war because they were on their way to worship when Union troops marched past them.
Oh.
This unexpected event led to the cancellation of services and the transformation of the church into the medical facility.
I would hope.
So after the war, Sudley Church was restored and later rebuilt in the 1920s. So the church that's there is not the exact one. It's just a replica. It remains a historical site, and it commemorates the sacrifices made during the Civil War and the humanitarian efforts of its congregation. Many of these homes or churches, especially large homes, were taken by Union or Confederate and turned into hospitals, or people were even living in their home and were ordered to treat the wounded and to help out in the war effort. Pop-up hospitals were a thing, and I think that leads a lot towards the emotions that are attached to some of these locations, creating the potential for paranormal activity.
And if you think about it, the Civil War, the casualties that were involved in it outnumbered any wars since that time. Like, it was so bloody and so many casualties that those poor people had to do what they had to do. You use whatever you could just to keep soldiers treated, or try to keep them from dying, obviously. But I couldn't even imagine. And there were some that was so bad that they couldn't even, at some places, they couldn't even get to bodies, all the bodies that were on the battlefield.
They had to treat them there. Some of those amputations happened right there out in the open.
Yeah. Ugh.
So some of the reports for paranormal activity include groaning and crying for help, which, knowing what happened there, that sounds a lot like residual energy.
Yeah, it does. That breaks my heart, though.
I know. These are, clearly people who are suffering at the time of their death. Apparitions of wounded soldiers are seen, and strange lights in the surrounding woods, which to me is interesting. I wonder if many were buried on that property, and that's where some of these lights could come from. If not, that could be logically explained if you think maybe you're looking at fireflies lighting up at night. You have to consider some of the natural activity that could occur.
There is the theory out there that spirits our energy, and that when seen, they can manifest. And trust me, I don't like the orb thing, but in balls of light, like
Right.
the orbs.
Mhm.
And who's to say they didn't trace through some woods as they were getting to the main area, or even back during that time, the woods weren't fully formed yet, but has grown up since. So I think it's a very real possibility that lights could be seen. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
could they mix them up with fireflies? But
Sure. Well,
don't you think, though,
because it
people,
occurs in the surrounding woods makes me suspicious of animals like insects and fireflies. But why wouldn't those lights be like the location of the church?
but also looking at it, if you're from the area and you're familiar with the area, you're going to know the difference in a firefly and a unique
You would
ball of
think.
light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we don't really know for sure, but you have to take all those things into consideration.
Yeah. And we're taking both the proponent and the opponent viewpoint, the psychic and the skeptic. So
Yeah, for sure.
how would it be explained from a paranormal or metaphysical viewpoint versus what could there be for a logical explanation, and how far of a stretch would it be to be explained in a logical way? So I would say that's just something you'd have to consider if you're seeing activity. If you're in this area, could that be fireflies, or is this potentially spirit? Now, I know what you're referring to about orbs,
Mm-hmm.
and gosh, have we done an episode on orbs yet? Probably not. That
I
could
don't think
be
so.
that could be an episode here, because that's a very controversial topic for paranormal investigators,
Mm-hmm.
especially those who are debunkers like myself or skeptics. But I have witnessed what seems like plasma light in very small ball shape before at a location. It was the only activity we had at this investigation. You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think you
And
mentioned that in a previous episode.
yeah, I might have mentioned it in our
Mhm.
beginning episode, actually.
Yeah. I can't
And
remember which one, but I know that because it
Right.
stood out to you as not your typical orb.
And it was right in front of a shrine to someone who had passed in that family.
Mhm.
So the puzzle pieces lined up, leading towards paranormal activity. And there was a fan nearby, and it would have blown this dust that might have been reflecting in the direction of the wind, and this countered that. So it didn't have any natural movement, and I saw it with my own eyes. So this is why I stand firm to the orb photograph, and why I believe most of those are not paranormal, because I strongly feel if it's captured in a photo, if it's something like plasma or something that gives off light, we would have seen it with our eyes at the time the photo was taken, just like the one that I saw with my own eyes.
Right.
So maybe that's what people are seeing in the woods, maybe not, but it's still interesting to talk about, right? Because it's
Oh, for
unique.
sure.
It's not like your typical footsteps or a shadow.
Mhm.
That's unique enough for somebody to write down as a claim.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them a benefit of the doubt there. But other modern visitors, so now it's a museum. Again, it was rebuilt and restored in the 1920s. So it's part of the museum that's in Manassas, or the park that's in Manassas. Visitors are frequently report being touched or feeling being touched when no one's nearby. Sudden emotional waves of grief, fear, or anxiety. So that's that empath stuff again.
Mhm.
And camera malfunctions. So maybe the battery drains out of the camera that they're using to take photographs with. And unexplained mists, shapes, and photos. Again, I'd probably say that's pareidolia. But
Possibly.
with a lot of these reports like that, the park rangers don't officially endorse any paranormal activity for this entire park, but they do acknowledge that there are frequent reports. So the more word gets out, and I'm sure we're not helping with that in this episode, if anybody in Virginia is listening, it draws people to the area, and then everybody's looking for paranormal activity. So you're going to get increased claims. You're going to get increased incidences where people feel like they've captured something in a photo.
Sure. So this next area is Chinn Ridge, and it's also known as Longstreet's killing ground. Now, this was on August the 30th of 1862, and it was here that Confederate General James Longstreet led a massive 28,000 man assault that nearly cut off the Union Army's retreat and secured a decisive victory for the Confederacy, while heroic stands by Union troops prevented total annihilation.
Wow. 28,000?
Yes.
So we hear about Civil War history, and we at least coming from the North, and how overpowering the North was. And they won, ultimately. Sorry, spoiler alert. So I always thought the Union Army had the upper hand the whole time. I didn't know that the Confederate had these epic battles where they really dominated, at least early on.
Yeah, because they won some of those
This Bull Run
spots.
was definitely Confederate. And I've heard that too. I know that they won some battles because this war went on for years. So that's a lot. That's a big number.
And this would be like why they won this particular one too.
This
They had
particular, sure.
yeah, they outnumbered.
But our notes do say that there was a heroic effort from the Union that prevented complete annihilation.
Correct. Or what was left of them.
Right.
Gosh. So they were like at it for 2 days.
Wow.
And the Union General John Pope wrongly believed that the Confederates were actually retreating when they weren't. And then on the afternoon of August the 30th, he ordered an attack on Stonewall Jackson's forces, unaware that Longstreet's wing of 28,000 men had arrived and were now positioned. Now, this ridge, Chinn Ridge, became known as the killing ground, or also Longstreet's killing ground, because it was the epicenter of a desperate late afternoon struggle, and the Confederate forces hammered the Union forces, resulting in mass casualties. They almost wiped them all out. Now, the outcome, by roughly 6:30 p.m., the Union line on Chinn Ridge was gone, but the resistance there, followed by the defense of Henry Hill, did allow the Union to retreat safely out of Bull Run, this area, into the cover of darkness. Now, of course, again, you're going to have these sightings of these full-body apparitions, which commonly they're either wearing Union or Confederate uniforms, they're standing or maybe moving silently, they appear suddenly, either in an open field or at the tree lines or on the hill's crest, and then they disappear when they're approached. Also, this is what's interesting about this, and I'm wondering if it has something to do with how many soldiers were nearly wiped out for the Union, but some observers at this Chinn Ridge say that they see a lot of wounded or staggering soldiers. So they're known as the walking wounded. That's the nickname. And it's like apparitions of these soldiers limping across fields, or men clutching their sides or their arms, or these apparitions collapsing and vanishing, or sounds of this labored breathing, and often seen or experienced or heard at dusk, which again, it goes back to the time of the fighting.
Right.
So maybe residual?
Sure. Yeah. The environmental conditions, the lighting is just right to see and witness. Lighting that could also be just right for pareidolia effect, shadow play, eyes playing tricks on you. The activity explains it away and supports potential paranormal events.
And you have some of these same common auditory phenomena, like the muskets that you hear, big artillery booms with no visible source, officers shouting commands, drums or bugles that are heard.
The trumpet, that kid in the band is practicing.
Anyway, metallic clatter of equipment. So that's interesting. Who knows? Is it some sort of equipment like shovels or muskets?
Loading a rifle.
Or even the musket balls themselves, the shells themselves, maybe. Metallic
in
sound.
The cannons. Yeah, maybe.
Now, witnesses even sometimes report hearing these battle sounds on calm days, too.
Right, because if it's windy, it could be sound being carried from
right.
normal logical things.
Right. There's even feelings of like sudden waves of this panic or this dread feeling, like overwhelming anxiety, the urge to leave immediately, sensation of this impending danger, and feelings of confusion or disorientation. Now, some would interpret this as an imprint of soldiers' terror during the collapse, of that line here at Chinn Ridge.
Yeah, that empath, if you're sensitive to feeling other people's emotions, and if those emotions are imprinted in that environment, that makes sense from a paranormal perspective. But how could it be explained logically? It could be just the emotion of knowing what happened on that location, and you start your own human emotions
reacts to it.
react to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah,
Having empathy for the losses that occurred at these places.
absolutely.
Either way, it's giving gravity to what happened, whether you're experiencing true emotions that are imprinted or your own emotions are reacting to the history and the respect for the fallen that have occurred on that location.
Right. There's even like some physical sensations, and the physical wasn't experienced at every location. So it's interesting that it's at this one too. But sensations of being touched or even being followed. People report feeling like a hand on their shoulder, tugging on their clothing, footsteps pacing behind the visitors, presence moving alongside of them. But when they turn, there's nobody there. And then, of course, your typical shadow figures and misty forms moving, these dark shapes moving across the open ground. They're typically seen as human-sized shadows. There's that dense fog patch that forms suddenly that we've talked about.
That's common for natural weather in that area geographically.
Right. Figures dissolving into thin air. Now, photographs, and I know how you feel about that.
Yeah.
But photographs sometimes capture unexplainable forms or light anomalies.
Now, this park is pretty popular as far as paranormal activity goes. When you look at Gettysburg, that's really well known. Lots of people go and expect to see paranormal activity at Gettysburg. This is like your second place location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think people go in hoping to capture something, or any Civil War battlefield. But this one in particular has
Right.
a lot of claims here. So are we adding to it when we go in with that expectation and we start clicking photos and we think every little smudge or dust or patch of fog is now all of a sudden it goes? We've
Not
got all
if
these
you're,
amateur hunters now that
I was going to say, not
aren't
if you're a
ruling things out.
experienced paranormal
No,
investigator.
exactly. But that's what I'm saying. You've got amateurs who aren't sure how to rule out
Right.
the explained
Mm-hmm.
or
Absolutely.
what can be explained.
Yeah. Then get this, phantom cavalry. So this is cool. People describe hearing the sounds of horses moving, like even galloping at speed, hard hoofbeats on the ground, snorting or breathing sounds, and a sensation of something rushing past.
So these are phantom horses. That's
Yes,
cool.
phantom ghost horses, but no animals or riders, of course, are visible. They
Right.
just get the sounds and with this
Right.
associated.
And just horses in this area in general are probably not common today like they were then.
Oh, I'm sure
So-
back then horses
Oh,
were
yeah,
a source of
Sure.
transportation.
It's like, why wouldn't we have more of that kind of activity in other places, even in Oklahoma, where we have historic Guthrie, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the activity seems to be from buildings that were of this same time frame, or even late 1800s before cars.
Right.
Why don't we hear more horse sounds? I guess they die peacefully and their souls carry on to where they're going to go.
Maybe.
But these horses are very emotional creatures. It's not surprising to me if I accept the paranormal and
Yeah.
the theory, and that these emotional creatures may have also gone through some kind of sudden death or traumatic death, that their souls are imprinted and their spirits could be present.
Who knows? Maybe they have souls just like other animals. Like, I fully believe that some of your dogs and your cats and different animals have souls. So why not?
There's another idea for an episode, animal spirits.
I thought about it before you did.
Let's do it. Let's put that in our notes. Write us
Yes.
in and let us know if you want us to do an episode on animal spirits.
Mm-hmm.
I think we
Animal
should.
souls, animal spirits.
You may not
Hey.
have to email, but do it anyway, because I think we're going to do it.
All right. So we also have nighttime encounter. So after dark, this Chinn Ridge area becomes extremely isolated, but reported nighttime phenomena include marching sounds across the ridge, equipment rattling, voices speaking indistinctively, and flickering lights that resemble lanterns.
Now that sounds cool. That does not sound like fireflies.
Right, but here's the thing. If it's extremely isolated, then who's witnessing it? Now, some visitors do report feeling surrounded by these unseen figures. And modern visitors frequently also report being touched with no one nearby. Sudden, again, these emotional type waves of grief, fear, anxiety. They have camera malfunctions, unexplained mist or shapes in photos. Now, again, park rangers who work there do not officially endorse paranormal claims, but they do acknowledge that they've been given some frequent reports.
Yes.
Why would Bull Run be so haunted?
We just covered it all.
Exactly. But the first large-scale bloodshed of the war, sudden violent deaths, impoverished hospitals, and untreated wounded, and a vast preserved landscape with minimal modern intrusion. So, unlike these urban battle sites, the quiet isolation could amplify the atmosphere more dramatically.
Yes, and that ends the stories that we have to share with you on the Battle of Bull Run, both the first battle and the second battle a year later.
Right.
So, to close out the history, the Battle of Bull Run proved that the Civil War could be long and devastating.
It was.
With all the losses, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides underestimated the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And became a turning point for modern warfare from an industrial warfare perspective. All the innovation and the weapons and the tools that were used during the battle, and learning that what they needed to help survive and carry on. Of course, because of the trauma and the drastic losses, many ghost stories, of course, emerge decades after a war. The stories carry on. They're spread throughout families, and tourism helps to spread these stories and these legends as well. So when
I think so, yeah.
I saw a ghost, I've got to go too. And that exponentially increases the stories and the reports. So it seems we have more reports of paranormal experiences now than maybe they did early after the war, because it's just social media and the speed at which news travels, and stories and families and tourism and accessibility to these places to go visit.
Right.
So the persistence of similar reports across the generations keeps these mysteries alive. And today, these preserved fields remain a place of remembrance.
And for some, maybe a place for trapped, lingering spirits.
And you can share your own parastories, topic suggestions, and comments to psychic and skeptic, all spelled out, at gmail.com. So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.